Now clearly the amount of space down here is quite restricted, especially when I need to get an alternator in, which would normally sit down here somewhere. Makes it even worse. So what I'm wondering is whether I could actually remove the water pump and put the alternator in where the water pump is, and that would be something like this, which is, by the look of it, would be pretty easy. And that would also mean this idler wouldn't be necessary, because the alternator could do that on its own, driven by the grooved side. Now, the thing about alternators, as being AC devices with a rectifier built in, I see no reason why they shouldn't go backwards. It just means the rectifier would work in the opposite direction, and I don't think there's any problem with that at all. The beauty of it would be that I could also use the same mounting points as the water pump currently does. And of course, I should mention that concept would then involve using an electric water pump. So that is definitely something worth thinking about. I should point out that the water pump on this engine, the AJ30, is not within the engine block. So the actual physical pump is this thing here. And it's not built into the block as it would be, for example, on a classic Mini or old Fords and things like that. So the water pump is already outside of the block. The only question is about how it's driven and how it's controlled. So that sounds like it could be a thing. And of course it gets round the whole question, which I was spending such a long time a little while ago thinking about, which was how much output power do I need from an alternator. And I think I came up just barely under 40 amps, which is suitable for one of those micros alternators. But this one here, which I think was selected for a Subaru or something, I think it's I don't know, 90, 110 amps or something of that kind. So that would definitely make up for the fact that the water pump would have to be driven electrically, obviously providing extra load for the whole electrical system. This does sound like a remarkably good idea to provide that steering shaft with no access issues. It does indeed. So here's the concept with the water pump removed. So the alternator itself would sit in this space, mounted to the three mounting points which were previously there for the water pump. Rather like this. Seems kind of reasonable, doesn't it? And it also provides quite a bit of clearance for the steering universal joint. It's still pretty tight in there. I could get around that problem by rotating the steering rack down like this, which is a little bit tight to do with my fingers. So I could alter this bracket down here, this tube, because although it's making the steering rack move backwards at the moment, that can be compensated for by remaking this so that in principle there's no reason why this input shaft shouldn't even go out horizontally. Obviously it's going uphill at the moment, which should provide a huge amount of extra clearance down there. As long as it's on the same axis as far as the steering arms are concerned, that should work. Yeah, so I've just moved the rack I've rotated it on this tube here, and this input shaft is now going out horizontally. It does mean that the steering rack is too far back at the moment, but that's just a function of the bracketry down here, so I could move it forwards to compensate for that, so the steering rack would think it's in exactly the same place as before, because it doesn't care what angle the drive goes in. That's just a cog, as long as the steering arms themselves going out in the same position. And obviously that would also provide a bit more clearance to the front pulley, which would be handy as well. So it would mean going right under. In fact, you could even make it go so that it's going downhill, which would be interesting. Okay, so I've detached the steering rack from its mounting brackets because I need to get the angle. The angle is determined by the bracket, but the forward and back position can't be allowed to move. So I've moved the rack forward compared to its bracketry, so it's in the same position in the cutout in the chassis, which you can't see, where we maybe see a little bit of it there. It's got a half moon type cutout for the gator. So it's in the same position, but now the input shaft to the steering rack is horizontal, and that means it goes under the engine more cleanly. But I think one of the things for sure, it's a heck of a lot more clear, if that's a word, a heck of a lot more clearance now than there was previously. So I think the answer to my steering rack stroke alternator problem is an electric water pump. Alright, so I have taken off the water pump, obviously, and also the idler wheels, which I don't think are going to be needed either, because the belt path will be going around here up to the alternator, which will be around about there. The only slight issue is alternators don't mind which way up around they go because they have a rectifier inside, but there is a cooling fan inside here, and arguably just inside, maybe you can see some little shiny things turning around, cooling fan, and arguably they're facing the wrong way. I think it's worth risking this one. I suspect that suck rather than blow, unlike a radiator fan where you have the wind blowing through, an alternator doesn't really have that. So sucking, blowing, I suspect doesn't make a heck of a lot of difference. Failing that, I can get one from a Honda, which I believe they tend to rotate the other way around with different cooling fan on. But I think I'm going to go with this one. It's a good shape and size, and see how it goes. So I just need to make some brackets. Here's my prototype or demonstration, proof of concept, I think is probably the best word. Proof of concept front mounted alternator position. There's no brackets here just yet, it's just simply mounted on a bit of studding which was left into a hole that's left from where the water pump was. So essentially the water pump is fitted in the same position, sorry, the alternator is fitted in the same position that the water pump was, and a lot of the angles are fairly crucial. You need to make sure there's enough contact area between the belt and the pulleys concerned, and in this case I also need to, I'll just come around the other side, I also need to make sure that there's a space for the power steering, sorry, what's it called? The air conditioning pump, which will be down here somewhere. Let's move my hand out of the way. So the air conditioning pump belt will be, the pulley will be down here somewhere, yet to be precisely located. So I think I've got all the angles right. There's just a possible, you see this piece of webbing here, there's a similar one down here out of shot, and I may have to cut that back in order to let the belt run smoothly here. In fact, maybe, not sure if this is in the shot or not, but I may have to grind that back. I think I can put up with that, to be honest. It means that there's no need for an idler wheel over here, but the one over here still will be used. So proof of concept, and I'll now need to move on from this to a prototype or pattern into a proper strong piece of mounting, because after all, this thing is a heavy item. Of course, this also gets around the whole question about how much alternator power do I need, because this is, I think, 110 amps output, and that it needs to be more than I previously calculated if I don't have a mechanically powered water pump, which I will have to have, and all of that has the advantage that it makes the connectivity for the steering a heck of a lot easier. Right, so here's my going the next step beyond proof of concept into what I suppose you might call prototype. So we now have a bracket fitted to the original water pump mountings, and all the belts routed through. I can see that changing the belt in this arrangement could be a bit of a pain, but let's not worry about that side of it. So here is my partial bracket fixed to the original water pump mountings, and anyway, the belts is routed round, well, everything apart from the air conditioning compressor, which would be down here, but there's plenty of, that's basically how it used to be fitted, so that should be fine. But yeah, the sort of proof of concept moves a stage closer with the alternator mounted on the front of the engine, which and also leaves usefully this power stud well clear of the chassis, which is a good thing. So, and the pulleys, I think, line up. There probably is a case for fine adjustment there, but it's pretty much there. So we're just left with the possibility, or the fact, that the alternator will be running backwards, but it's an alternator, the key word there being alternating. So it won't run reverse voltage or something like you would get it with a DC generator. It should work just the same as before. Yeah, another thought, because of course an alternator is normally mounted on two lugs here, which swivel, the whole thing swivels that way, and the adjustment, if you like, is fixed on here. Now, if this plate is continuous all the way around and a lot thicker, assuming that the positioning is correct, it does offer the possibility that this lug here doesn't need to be supported at all, because the whole thing is supported on its front face rather than the side. I think that's a distinct possibility. So you've got storm Eunice blowing away outside, can you hear it? But I'm still managing to get stuff done. I'm getting a bit nervous, to be fair. Might have to go in a minute. Anyway, yeah, so I've got my alternator mounted back to front, as it were, where the water pump used to be. And it is only temporary because it's quite thin, this plate, but even so, it's pretty strong. So, and it's only fixed by the front mountings, which, yeah, I think I'm quite happy about actually. And the adjustment for the belt tightness will obviously be via the tensioner down here, and the air conditioning pump will be approximately in its original position, which is down here. So that should be okay. But the good news is I've got an alternator mounted on. It fits quite comfortably in front of the engine, and that means there's loads of space for the steering shaft to go past it, or past the bottom of the engine down here. So that'll be my next thing. Yeah, but I'm quite pleased with that actually. I'll probably get it. I'm sure I'll probably get it remade in some 10mm plate or something like that. But yeah, I'm quite happy with it.